Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Dr. Arunima Sarin, and this is our fourth and final part of the tutorial where we fill out a psychology PhD application form together. Let's get into it. So the first thing I'm going to do to get started is find my application form and log back in. Just as a recap, we covered all the sections starting from degree program selection down to faculty in part 1. We covered sections from language background all the way down to employment history in part 2. Information from psychology program supplemental form all the way down to additional materials we covered in part 3. And today in part 4, we'll cover the last 4 tabs and wrap up this application form. So the first tab that we have to get started with today is a tab on supplemental data. Now there's a couple of things to note here. If you kind of just scroll through, it's asking about some personal information about any other external grants you might have applied for, and then again, some personal information. As a background, there's 2 things to bear in mind. So first, PhD applications, or rather PhD programs in most good universities in the US are fully funded, which means you don't have to worry about getting financial aid or a scholarship. If you get through the program, you will be given funding. For instance, at this particular university, you get funded for 6 years to finish your program. Having said that, if you have an external fellowship, a grant that you can apply to, it's always a great idea. It's a great validation of your skills by someone else who's also evaluating you, and it's a great validation that you should tell anywhere you're applying about. It also gives you a little bit more power and makes you a little bit less dependent on exactly where you'd want to go, because if there's different programs and one of them has funding, one of them doesn't, you don't have to worry. The funding doesn't have to be a consideration for you if you have an external fellowship that you can apply to. As far as this program, this university is concerned, we will get funded if we get in. So we don't have to worry about financial aid, but obviously we fill in everything. We provide them with all the information like they have asked us to. Now, coming back to the actual tab here, it's telling us right at the start that it's going to ask us a bunch of questions, but these questions are not, the answers to these questions are not going to be shared by the admissions committee. They're only going to be reviewed by the Office of Financial Aid. So they're not going to factor in to whether you get selected or not. The first question asks us about our marital status. If you select anything except married, you don't have to provide any more information. If you select married, then it's going to ask you a few follow-up questions like your spouse's citizenship, their visa status, their name, their occupation. Next question asks if you have any dependent children. If you say no, there's nothing more to provide. If you say yes, then it's going to ask you 2 other follow-up questions. The question after that asks if you are a veteran, have been one in the past, or are currently on active duty, or if you're a spouse of someone who's been a veteran or is on active duty. The next chunk asks us to list out any non-Harvard fellowships and grants we might have applied for, and it gives us a long list of some common types of grants and scholarships that students applying to postgraduate programs seem to apply for. If you have applied for a fellowship or a grant and it's in the list, great. If it's not, you can just select other. And then write the name of the fellowship. Regardless of whatever choice you select, if you make a choice, it's going to ask you 3 other questions if you have been assured the funding or if you're waiting. So if you've gotten the result or you have applied but haven't heard back, how many years that funding is going to cover, and then how much you're going to get. In the please upload any documents about your fellowship or grant if applicable. If you have received a letter that assures you of your funding, I would definitely share that here. And then you can obviously apply or list more than one. The next category is called special funds and has a bunch of multiple choice questions. The idea again here is this is money that private citizens or organizations have given to the university, but who can benefit from those endowments has been restricted by donor preference. So those preferences can be based on identity, on geography, on some part of your social economic experience. And so this is just asking for information to see if you would qualify for one of those. Whatever you select here will not affect the amount of grant support you receive. It will affect what type of grant support you receive. Again, conditional on you getting an offer. So it gives us a bunch of states, and we can select if we've lived in any of those states for 10 years or longer. If you choose any of these options, it's going to open up a drop down, a little box where you get to then share your actual location, your address, and for how long you stayed at it in that state. The next asks if you've graduated from any of the schools that they've listed, if you've graduated from Harvard College and are planning a career in public service. If you select no, there's nothing more you have to provide. If you select yes, a little box opens up where they ask you to detail what your aspirations are, what kind of position you want to work at, etc. Next 3 questions ask, kind of check in about your ancestry, if you are descendants of any of these people, or if you have any of these last names. If you select any of the last names, it's going to ask you to state the exact relationship you have to that last name. Whether it's from your mom's side, your dad's side, that type of thing. Okay, finally, it asks if we are applying for the Kempner Fellowship. So the Kempner Fellowship is a specific fellowship for those PhD applicants who are going to be focusing on natural and artificial intelligence research during their PhD programs. If you are going to be working on those topics, if you are in a department that works on those topics and your research is going to overlap with those topics. So this is just asking if you want to be contacted by the Kempner Fellowship, Kempner Graduate Fellowship, if you want to know more about it. And again, it's telling you something that is also true for other fellowships, which is that getting that fellowship is independent of getting into the program of your choice. So you can select yes or no. And then once you do that, we can click continue. So the next tab asks us to provide our signature. And this functions as a legally binding contract where you are consenting to and admitting to all of the all of the information they've listed above. So things like all the information you provided them in the document is accurate, it's honest, you haven't lied about anything. All the materials where you've written something, your answers to additional material, your resume, your statement of purpose, your personal statement, those have been authored by you and not by a third party or by generative artificial intelligence or machine learning software. It does say that you can use a third party or generative artificial intelligence to assist your application, suggest edits or identify grammatical, but using it to develop your work is forbidden. It also says, that you are granting permission to the admissions committee to have all of this sensitive information about you, and also you're granting your recommenders to provide that information about you. Most importantly, right, you're committing to saying that everything you've provided, all information you've provided to them is accurate and has been authored by you. And if that changes, if it's discovered that that is untrue, then that can lead to rescinding your offer or disciplinary action, your dismissal if you've come in, or even them revoking your degree if that's discovered at a later date. Obviously, this is kind of big and dense, but essentially it's just making sure that every piece of information you've provided to them is accurate and honest, and you've done that to the best of your ability. You haven't got some other external body or ChatGPT to generate your documents. You've actually worked on them. They're authentic. They're a reflection of the true experiences you've had. So fairly straightforward and simple. Just type in your name and then that stands in as your signature. Next tab is about application fees. Most PhD programs have an application fees and it varies. In this case, it's $105. Now you can ask for a fee waiver, and if you do, it's going to ask you a bunch of questions, like if you've participated in any kind of graduate school preparation program or conference. Many universities have been offering these now for I think 3 or 4 years. They usually take place over the summer. So if you have, you select yes, and then you kind of tell them which one it is. And if it's not in the list, then you can specify what the other category is. If you haven't taken part in any of these, you can click no, and then it asks you a bunch of questions about your marital status, the number of dependents you may have, what your gross income was. If you're single, if you're married, then yours and your spouse's combined, and then if you have any assets. Now you can enter like the actual objective true values here, obviously, because they might ask for that information later, right? And also remember, in the signature form, we sign that all the information we're providing is true and accurate and we're not lying. So provide the actual true gross income for 2023 for you or you and your partner. Depending on what information you provide, you will either be granted the fee waiver directly, so the amount due upon submission will turn to zero, or if you have a lot, or, if your income is above a certain threshold, whatever the threshold for that university is, it's going to tell you that based on the income information alone, you don't qualify for a fee waiver, but you can let them know in a little box if there are some extenuating circumstances that aren't captured by this information but do impact your current ability to pay for the fees, for the application fees, then you can describe that to them here. And it says that if you do decide to do that, then you don't actually have to make the application fee payment at the time. They will let you submit your application so it can be processed, and they'll review your request for the fee waiver in conjunction. If you're approved, then you'll be notified and you don't have to do anything else. If your request is not approved, then you'll be sent a link that will require you to pay the application fees. Don't forget to tick this box and then you can continue. Okay, so the last and final tab is review and submit. Now, this is telling us very clearly, once we submit the application, we will not be able to make any modifications, upload any new information, any edits. So you want to be really, really sure that when you click submit, you have looked at everything, you're happy with how everything looks, all your documents have the right information, the right format, there's no errors in anything you've typed. So make sure you go through that application again. Also, if you miss something out, it's going to flag that out on this page. If you miss out on any required field, it's going to flag it in red up here, and you are going to be required to address it before you can submit your application. If you miss out on providing any information that is optional, it's going to flag it here in orange. You don't have to provide that information. It's just telling you you haven't provided it, but you can go ahead and submit your application without addressing it. So I left two things on purpose just to kind of illustrate how this works. So I'm just going to quickly go now and fix those two and be right back. All right, so now that I've finished all of those, when I come back to the review and submit page, I don't see any red flags or orange flags telling me that I've missed out on any required or optional information. The only two tabs I see now are either to save this application for later if I want to come back and review it, or to finalize application and pay. And once I click that button, I will not be allowed back into the application portal to make any changes. If you've just finished filling out the application form, I recommend maybe saving it for later. And if you have the time, come back and have a look at all of your answers with a fresh set of eyes, just to make sure there's no typos, no errors, nothing missing. I mean, you have provided all the information, right? We know that from the system, but just to make sure that there's no typos or weird information anywhere. Once you're happy with everything, you go ahead and click that finalize application and pay button. If you have not applied for the fee waiver, then that's going to be the next screen where you can provide details of your card, either a Visa or a MasterCard in this case, but whatever you're applying to, you can provide information of the card that you're going to use to make that payment. If you've applied for a fee waiver, then after you click this button, that's going to be it. Your application goes through, everything is locked, and you are done. So this is where we're going to wrap up the tutorial. And that brings us to the end of this tutorial series where we fill out a PhD application form together. I will leave you with one important parting thought, that you know what the deadline is, so what date, what time, and what time zone, and you make sure to submit your application well in advance of that, ideally, but definitely before that. Don't wait till the last minute. But also, please know that if you don't submit your application by the deadline time, then no one can help you. because these portals are programmed to completely kind of shut down once it's application deadline, and no amount of emailing anyone or asking for help is going to change that. So please make sure that you are clear on the date, the time, and the time zone on what the deadline is, and you submit your application well in advance of that. All right, so that finishes our 4-part tutorial on filling out a psychology PhD application form together. I hope this was helpful. These forms, they're not difficult to fill, but they can feel a little overwhelming just because of how many tabs you have to respond to and how much information you have to provide. And so hopefully doing it together made it a little less scary, a little less overwhelming. If you thought this was helpful, please like and share this video, subscribe for more content like this. All the best. Bye.